Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our first of a series of live events for Buildtastic. I've got two quite famous and infamous characters in front of me here on my virtual screen in the guise of Chris and Clive, and I'm going to go through and ask them a series of questions about how they got into the construction industry, what their aspirations were, the projects that they've worked on, just so you ladies and gents out there listening can find a bit more about it. So over to you first, Clive. Could you please tell me about yourself, so introduce yourself and what your role has been and maybe still is in the construction industry, please?
Okay. Yeah, as you've already said, I'm Clive Turrell. I had an interest in woodwork when I was at school. I also had an uncle that was a village builder, and I used to help him, particularly on the carpentry and joinery.
Yeah.
I also enjoyed engineering drawing at school, metalwork, so all the practical subjects. That led me to an apprenticeship with a company called G. Bainbridge and Son. I did a 5-year apprenticeship as a joiner. We did a lot of work on banks, shop fitting, churches, that kind of thing.
Oh.
And then I moved on to working for a construction company, Bernard Sunley and Sons. And my first big contract to work on was Gatwick Airport, the terminal building.
Wow.
And I was a foreman on that for over 2 years. I stayed with that company, Bernard Sunley, and stayed there for 25 years, became their regional manager. And during that time, we built offices for the DOE. Today's value probably 120 million. I was a section manager on that. What else did we do? I've got some notes here.
A very long and established career then, Clive. It sounds really exciting.
Yeah, it was very good, very good. I'm trying to find a few more. Oh, Woolgate House in the city, again,
Yeah.
would be £100 million.
And those amounts of money in those days are massive by today's money as well, aren't they?
No, those figures I'm giving you are current values.
Are they current? Yeah.
Inflation would dilute them, or deflation. What was your next question?
No, that's it. I'm going to come over to Chris now just to ask him about. Chris, welcome. Can you just introduce yourself and tell me about your role, what it has been, what it is currently? Thank you.
Okay. Hi, Debbie. Well, thanks for the opportunity. I'm Chris Chivers. My current role is as a non-exec chairman of a developer and a construction company in Chelmsford. I've also obviously actively been involved in the worshipful company of Joiners and Sealers, a livery company. I've been around in the industry for quite a long while, really. When I looked at that question, I realised it's 50 years I've been working in the industry. I started when I was 18, but I got into it a little bit by accident. When I was 10, I think I told the headmaster at my primary school I wanted to be a draftsman. And he said, "You're far too bright for that. You need to go to the grammar school and become a draftsman's boss, become an architect." Well, I did go to the grammar school, but the school wasn't as successful for me as they hoped. So when I left, I ended up doing a full-time construction technician's course at college.
Yeah.
And that was for a year. And during that period of time, I got a 4-week stint with a local contractor company called Hammond and Miles in Ilford. And after the 4 weeks, they said, "When you finish your college course, we'd like you to come and work for us." So I had a job lined up.
Brilliant.
I went off to become, with them, I was a trainee. Bonus surveying was the first job that trainees got on. It got them out there on sites and measuring up. I then slowly became a quantity surveyor. I left them and went to work for a local authority for a couple of years. That was good training because it taught me exactly how not to do it. Local authority didn't have the same approach as commercial businesses.
No, I'm sure.
And then I went on to another company. I ended up at a company called A. Symes in Stratford, who's now part of the Wilmot Group.
Yeah.
And I was a QS there for quite a period of time. I ended up as a senior surveyor, and then moved on to another company in the late 70s. And I eventually became a director and supervised 47 surveyors at that point. During that period working for them, I was transferred over to their part of the group. I was transferred over to the stone business.
Yeah.
And I became MD of the stone business for a couple of years. But it was just during that period of time when, in the early 90s, when everybody was struggling, and unfortunately the group didn't survive. But I then went on, worked another year as an MD for a small restoration company who's working under a bigger badge. Morgan Sindel was the company. I was there for a year. And then I moved on to Kilby and Gayford. I was there for another 17 years. And I moved my way through Kilby and Gayford. Started off as the MD of the building company. And then we did a management buyout in 1998. By the year 2000, we'd merged the three businesses: joinery, electrical, mechanical, and building. And I became the MD of the big company. And then 2008, we did a secondary buyout, and I became a group MD, and then became chief exec. None of which was deliberately planned. It just sort of happened because it came up in front of me, and I just kept going at that. Along the way, a bit like Clive, really, we had lots of different sort of projects that we were involved in. Kilby and Gayford, we did lots of bank work. We made a lot of joinery. We did a lot of church work. We did an awful lot of work in the heritage sector. So I've worked in places like the Palace of Westminster, Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, Downing Street, Whitehall, and lots of different churches we've done over the years. St Paul's is another one. So that's the end of the name dropping, really, but we did loads of them. And
so here I am, gents.
Sorry.
Fantastic. Here I am sat in front, albeit virtually, of two extraordinary characters, two extraordinary men who have kind of seen London grow as such and have been involved in some real key buildings that even today, you know, that are in the news every day. So I'm going to come on to Clive now. Clive, is there anybody or anything that was your initial inspiration for taking your career in construction? Is there that key person or, you know, something that you saw that really made you think, yeah, I'm going to do this?
Well, I did mention the subjects of school, which I was interested in. That obviously gave me a steer. I also had an uncle, again, I mentioned him, who was the village builder, if you like, and I did a lot of woodwork with him as an early teenager or mid-teenager. But during my apprenticeship, and then I'll come on to this now, there are several people I'd like to mention who have influenced me all the way through my career. Lovely. And during my apprenticeship, there was a foreman who, looking back, was probably the best craftsman I've ever met. He was absolutely superb, a fantastic craftsman. I also worked with, in fact, the chap who was subordinate to me as a foreman. As I moved up, this chap came in underneath me, a superb foreman who was very good at motivating the labour force. Because in those days, much of their labour was directly employed by the company rather than subcontracting, which it is today. Yeah. A great bloke. So you don't always look up to people, you can look downwards as well and still have a good opinion. There was a managing director who went off to become chief exec of the Fairclough Group. I worked under him as a general manager and subsequently as a construction director with another company. Another great man, and you learn from these people. I just want to quickly come back to, I sort of dried up on my list of projects.
No, please do.
If I may. And I found the list now. We constructed the Gucci headquarters in Grosvenor Street. Whoa. And that was a knockdown and rebuild. But the joinery in it, which is the more interesting part of it, I guess, there were a lot of construction problems, reinforced concrete frame, party wall awards, that sort of thing. But the joinery in it was in American walnut. And we cleared the country out of American walnut at that time. And the purchase value of the raw material was over £1 million, to give you some idea of the size of this thing. What else did we do? Buckingham Palace, which Chris mentioned, we built the security bunker there, an underground bunker. after that guy got into the Queen's room, if you remember.
Yeah, got over the garden.
There are a few jobs. Yeah. Which way are we going now?
Lovely. That's great. Thanks, Clive. I'm going to come back to you in a second and just ask you about character strengths in the construction industry. But before I do that, I'm going to give Chris his opportunity to tell us any influential people or peers or foremen or people that really looked to him or took him under his wing to inspire him in his industry as well.
I suppose there's that I mentioned it briefly earlier on. The headmaster at my primary school insisted that I went to the grammar school because I was capable of passing. In those days, we were doing the 11 plus.
Yeah.
So it was and that wasn't quite where I wanted to go because a lot of my mates were going to the technical school. But he said, no, you ought to go there. So followed his lead and off I went. But when I went to college full time, there was a quants lecturer who made a big impression on me with his approach and his style of sarcasm, I suppose, in the delivery of his subject was just something that appealed to me. I quite liked his style. And we obviously built up a rapport between us because when he retired, he came and knocked at the door of the office where I was working. I got a call from the reception saying that Harry Shorthose is in reception. Oh, what's he doing here? And when I went, he said, I'm just about to retire, Mr. Chivers. Always very formal. Just about to retire, Mr. Chivers. He said, I wondered if you'd like my textbooks.
Oh.
And I couldn't be more delighted. The fact that he'd chosen me to give his textbooks to.
And that he'd remembered you. So
yeah, and he made he did make an impression with it. And I love quantity surveying, but it took me on to bigger and better things. And then I had a couple of surveyors that I worked alongside who taught me a few tricks of the trade, so to speak. And one in particular said to me, you need to keep asking questions. Whatever you're doing, just keep asking questions. He said, when they get sick of you asking questions, ask a few more. Because that's the only way you're going to learn.
Fantastic
That's
advice.
absolutely true. Absolutely true.
I can see Clive chuckling in the background there, so it's clearly striking a warm chord with him about.
Dead right.
It's ended up making me what I consider to be challenging rather than inquisitive, you know. And it's okay. I've heard what you said. Now let me ask you another question, and it worked. It worked. So those guys are people who influenced me.
Brilliant. Well, that brings us on to a nice segue into Clive. Over to you about what sort of character strengths do you think it really are needed in the construction industry, and perhaps why?
Well, I think you've got to be prepared to work hard at it. But that probably applies to a lot of careers, but you need to work hard at it. You need to get on with your peers because you're interfacing with a lot of people, different people, up and down, different trades. Always be ready to learn. You never know everything. Even when you get to my age, you're still learning. All sorts of things are changing. Technology is changing. Computers are coming into the system or into the business. And on that point, one needs to keep abreast of changing techniques and technology.
Lovely, thank you, Clive. And Chris, over to you. What would you say about your character strengths?
Well, Clive's very rightly pinched one of my points. Hard work, you can't shy away from in the construction industry.
Yeah.
But I think it's for me, it's always been a need to make something happen. I've often seen meetings where people will sit there and chat about things for quite a period of time, and when everybody walks out and nobody's actually going away to do anything. So we just spent a couple of hours chatting, and for what purpose? You know, the one thing none of us have enough of is time. We're all short of time, and if we don't actively use our time properly, when we have to, when we're getting paid to do it, then we're failing in my view. And you know, we really do have to make sure that you walk out of a room saying, I know what I've got to do. I'm going to go off and do that. And when I come back to the next meeting, I will have had that done, finished. We can move on. Sure.
Thank you. Clive, anything to add to Chris's comments?
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Carry on, Chris. I interrupted you there. Sorry.
Well, I think that's the underlying thing. I think but it's also the ability to be versatile and to be able to adapt to whatever's thrown in front of you. You shouldn't be, well, I'm not sure I can do that. It's tell me what the problem is. Let's see if I can solve it.
Sure.
And having that ability to say, actually, I'll find the answer to this. I don't know it right now, but I will find the answer. And it might take me a few days, but we'll solve it. We'll find a way of getting through this.
Sure. Clive, anything to add to Chris's pearls of wisdom?
Well, just maybe to support what he said. But I think you've always got to be prepared to show willing and to take on menial tasks sometimes. Always work hard, because that's recognised by your peers and your bosses. And always seek advancement, and at all times to do a good job. Because at the end of the day, there's a client, and that client expects a good job.
Excellent. Thank you. So I'm going to come back to you, Chris.
Can I just add to that?
Yeah.
One quick point.
Of course you can.
The underlying things we used to use in the last business I was running a few years back was that if you were producing something for a client, and it just reinforces what Clive was saying, if you're producing something for a client, would you have the finished article in your own home?
Okay, yeah.
And if you're not prepared to accept that, or worse still, if your spouse is not prepared to accept that, then you're in trouble. So if you wouldn't have it in your own home, don't offer it to anybody else.
Sound piece of advice there, Chris. Thank you. So, Chris, I'd like to ask you now, what advice would you give a young person or an apprentice who's just about to embark on an exciting career in some aspect or another related to the construction industry?
Well, some of the points we've sort of touched on, Debbie, but I think you've got to be able to be versatile and adaptable. Don't say no, I can't do that. I don't think I can. I don't know how to, but I will find a way. Or I'll ask somebody, or I know somebody I can talk to about getting that to happen. Working hard has already been mentioned, but the other thing is don't let others decry your ability. There are people out there who'd like to see you fail, sadly. And I've had it a couple of times in my career where people, well, I'm not sure I should be telling you this because you'll take my job. You've just got to ignore that, let that float past you. And the one thing you don't want to do, in my experience, is to pick up on things that are generally accepted as being an excuse for not doing too well. For example, I come from a broken home. I'm not able to get to work because I haven't got the fare money and that sort of thing. Talk to somebody. There's always somebody out there who'll help. Yeah,
that's very valuable advice as well. Thank you, Chris. Clive, what would your advice be to a young person or perhaps going into the trade right now?
I missed some of that.
Sorry, Clive. I just said, what would your advice be to perhaps an apprentice or a young person going into the construction industry right now?
Well, I think I've probably covered it, or we've covered it. I think they need to have a flair for what they're going into, whatever trade they take. And I've mentioned that in my own case, which was woodwork, metalwork, engineering, drawing, that sort of thing. I think they need to have a flair towards that. Be prepared to work hard, get on with people. Like that. We've covered all this, really. Yeah,
lovely. Okay, just last little point then for Clive. How do you consider the future outlook of the construction industry amid these times? These ever-changing times where pressure is immense, technology is changing, we're in the middle of a pandemic, dare we mention it, etc., etc.
Well, we're going to come out of the pandemic sooner or later, hopefully sooner. But I think the future of the industry is good. I think it's always been good. We have our ups and downs, the industry, and it's controlled by the economic climate. Automation on and off site is well, it's been going for a long time, but it's coming in, and it will continue. I think there will be more and more prefabrication, off-site fabrication, which steers some of steers a lot of the work towards factory output. But there will always be a call for good craftsmen. And particularly in the refurbishment sector. and managerial positions.
Sure.
The managerial positions require good training, and that good training is based, in my opinion, on a craft background, largely on a craft background, because you start off with the nuts and bolts, and you work your way through from that. So you know every aspect of the industry as you move up.
Lovely, thank you. Chris, anything to add, in terms of what the future might hold in the construction industry?
Yeah, I've got a couple of things I picked up on recently. It'd probably be beyond my lifespan, but by 2050, there'll be another 2 billion people on this planet, according to the current forecasts.
Yeah.
So that puts us up to 9.7 billion across the globe. There's always going to be a need for shelter, and the more often you see these extreme events, you'll see the shelter gets battered first and disappears, and then people disappear with them. There's always going to be a need for construction. All the time you've got more people coming onto the planet, they'll need shelter.
Sure.
And as Clive's already mentioned, there's always going to be restoration. There's repairing the stock of what we've already got.
Yeah.
But there'll come a point when this little island of ours will be concreted over, because we'll have that many people on it.
I think just a small point to add, Debbie, the computer aid design, and I touched on that as well, but that is coming in more and more. And of course, computer controlled fabrication as well it is starting to creep in. So that's another angle. IT ability.
Okay, lovely.
For me, Clive, I think the youngsters are growing up with that IT ability.
Yeah.
Being able to press buttons. I've got a 3-year-old granddaughter who can send texts.
Swipe.
And it's all done. It's not a problem for them, and they'll come through all of that.
And I think what you're saying there about the IT is absolutely invaluable. I mean, the different packages that we've seen that have come through the gaming platform, for example, with augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, whatever the term is, with the headsets, I think we will see these start to emerge much more on site than we do at the moment, where you can look at a steel structure and then it can layer over and over through a particular camera or around a camera or under a floor without actually going down under. So
there is a setup in Coventry University. It was anyway. I don't know whether they've dismantled it, but they built a block there that was funded by bigger contractors, and they had a walkthrough arrangement on the site there with a 180 degree walk through the project, and they give them tasks to find things, and and because they were wearing VR, they're proper VR goggles, they were not allowed to bump into scaffold poles and walk through those. It was all proper stuff. So I've been up there a couple of times and seen that. It's impressive. Yeah,
really impressive. Clive, anything to leave the students for a thought for the future then?
Well, I think an apprenticeship is a good thing to have, and I think I've alluded to that as we've gone through. Qualifications, we haven't really touched on that.
I was going to ask you both a bit about training and things like that, what you thought.
So to get that, no doubt come back to that then. I think that's it really.
Lovely.
Lovely,
thank you. Chris, tell us a bit about training. What would you say to young people in terms of their training?
I'll couple it a little bit with the previous point, your question you asked. As you're training as an apprentice, your pay is quite lowly. But it will all change. It will all change. There's no doubt about that. And one thing I say is don't be veered off course by your peer groups. Your pals you went to school with who are now out, well, not so much in the current circumstances, out and about, going out drinking and out trying to find themselves a partner or whatever, just enjoying themselves while you're studying, because that is short-lived. Within a few years, that'll all break down. People get married, they go off, they split up, get themselves a partner, and all of that dies away. And you've got the rest of your life to worry about your building your own personal situation. And I'd say, like Clive said, stick with your apprenticeship, see it through to the end. If you can get to the top of the grade when you're doing it, you get to NVQ level 2, try and get to NVQ level 3. Get your company to support you through to level 3, because that added bonus, it's going to be extra money in your pocket at some point. And I think that's the right way to go, really. I didn't do an apprenticeship. I was an indentured student initially, and I did all mine as a desk jockey, really. I was a paper shuffler all my career. But you know, I did it in a different way. But as far as training is concerned, I think it's critical. And when you get to our age, and I've been through this process, we've supported trainees through lots of different things. I used to take on trainees in the office. I'd take apprentices on in the factory every year. We'd take additional apprentices on site. It was something I always did. Someone did it for me, so I try to return the compliment, really.
Sure, lovely. Clive, how about yourself and training? What would you say?
Well, I agree with Chris. Go through, get NVQ level 3. If you're ambitious, you want to get into management, you can move on. In my case, I did higher national certificate. I did went on to do the Institute of Building examinations, and from that RICS, which is sort of a backup, if you like. So, and there are things you can do for an individual, if he has the ambition to move into management and onto bigger things. I suppose that's really that's the way forward.
Lovely, thanks, Clive. Chris,
because Clive's just described much the same way that I went. I ended up moving across HNC, doing the Institute of Building exams, worked my way through that. And where I was supporting trainees, someone spotted it, and eventually I was asked if I'd like to be president of the Chartered Institute of Building. And that gave me 3 years as vice president and a year as president around the world, really, meeting members and seeing what was going on in different places.
Yeah.
Fascinating. And I started off as a trainee QS.
Yeah, wonderful. Chris, Clive, thank you so much for today. Is there anything else that I haven't covered that you would like to cover? Because I'm trying to follow a little script. So if you put your paws in the air, Chris, I'm sure I've forgotten about you telling us about your affiliation and all that side of stuff. I'm not
exactly
sure.
that. Exactly
that. I've just had a little light. So he's going to tell us about his affiliation to certain trade guilds. So over to you, Chris.
The delivery company that we both belong to, and I belonged to another one before this, but it didn't really suit me too much. But Joiners and Sealers, I've been connected with for quite a number of years, since the 1990s, because I condone the fact that they used our factory for the competition every year. And a number of them ganged up on me every year on that Saturday and said to me, "You ought to become a member of our livery company." And in the end, in 2010, I succumbed to that pressure and I joined. And I don't regret 1 minute of it. It's for the stage I was in my career, it's an opportunity to actually support what's going on with apprentices. And it's an opportunity to be with like-minded people and a proper purpose to give something back to the industry, which has done me proud, really. But as a junior member, as an apprentice, coming in as a yeoman or a freeman for the company is good, because you do get the opportunity to exploit your wares. So take that apprenticeship and being able to work for somebody, get commissions. We've had a number of our younger members, John and Clive will be able to rattle these names off. He's far more familiar with them than I am. But a number of our younger members have done work for current and past Lord Mayors, and where they've come through and said, "Oh, I need a coat of arms carving. Can you do that?"
Yeah.
We've got a freeman carving our chair at the moment, or sorry, making our chair at the moment. We've got a carver working on it who's also a freeman. All people that we've supported.
And we've got a liveryman doing the upholstery on it.
Indeed.
So fabulous.
So,
Clive, anything to add to Chris's comment?
Something I picked up on
to trade.
Yeah, something I picked up on the news just now, actually, prior to us getting together. The Prime Minister is talking about a project now for encouraging apprenticeships.
Yeah.
More money available. I don't know where it's coming from after COVID, but that's what they're promising. So I think that's a good sign. It is a recognition.
But also bringing it in line with traditional A levels and what's seen to be academic in inverted commas, and giving us that equal paving as is in Europe and all over the world, apart from here.
I would like to see the apprenticeship schemes taking a similar route to how they did when I did it, because I think that was a good way of doing it. I'm obviously biased because that's what I did, but it was a clear-cut progression route. And at the moment, it's not quite as clear-cut as it was in those days. But whether we'll get back to that, I don't know.
Can I just add one other point to that?
Absolutely.
It reminded me. The one thing we don't talk about very readily is the amount of money that can be earned in this industry.
Yeah.
And it's always trying to convince parents and teachers that the industry's not grubby and dirty. It's a solid industry. You do have to get your hands a little bit dirty, but it's not as grubby as it used to be, and it pays well. I can go back 10 years and think that I was paying craftsmen I had working for me £1,000 a week.
Yeah.
Didn't think twice about it. Now, my youngest boy is a trainee electrician. The numbers he's quoting now, it won't be long before he's on 65,000 a year.
Yeah.
And you know, and that's not really overdoing it. It's not grafting too hard, but he gets up and leaves home at 6 o'clock in the morning, comes home at 6 o'clock at night. But the pay's good.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really important for us to get across to our young people and influence their decisions about what they're going to do. So teachers, careers guidance, parents, and that's with this Build-tastic event going right from primary to really empowering those kids at 7, 8, 9 and infusing them to then come and do a post 16, whether it's an apprenticeship or a trade course, whatever that might be.
I'm sure
we've just finished this last couple of weeks ago, and I'm going this Friday to look at a project that I worked with on a Writtle Primary School in Chelmsford.
Yeah.
And we've managed to build a technology pod by begging and borrowing from parents and people we knew that we lent on and said, come and do us a favour. We need a hole dug. We need some timber supplied. We paid for a bit of it, but we've got it built on the cheap. But the quality's first class, and the kids have moved into it this term. And the idea is that they've got it as an IT pod outside of their main school. But they were involved in it right from the beginning with the design.
Brilliant.
I and another guy set out on the field, and we got them working on the setting out and measuring, and said, well, how many people do you want in this? Let's measure it out. And they're all primary school children. None of them are over the age of 11. And it's been wonderful to work with them. Some of the questions you got asked as well, you know, I hadn't thought about that, but
absolutely brilliant to get them involved and inspired at that age, isn't it?
It's all doable. It's lovely.
Yeah, no, I look forward to hearing about how that settles down then, Chris. That'd be brilliant.
I'll get some photographs on Friday and send them to you.
That'd be lovely. Thank you.
I'm sure Chris would agree, but I would do it all again. Just to sum it up.
Yeah.
That's a fabulous sum up, Clive and Chris. And can I just take this opportunity to say a heartfelt, warm thank you for all the students and the staff at West Suffolk College, but also all our primaries. We're in touch with 70 odd primary schools across Suffolk and Norfolk. We've got secondary schools, we've got high schools. So I really hope that today's little interview provides them with some enthusiasm and passion about being able to and wanting to do it. So I'll bid you both farewell. I'm sure I will not see you too soon. It will be not soon enough in my book. I always love your stories. You're great speakers, and you've come across really, really lovely across the airwaves for us today. So thank you very much, fellas.
Thank you for organising it, Debbie. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. This will be the first of many. You'll be bored of me, I tell you.
Never. That has
Cheers,
never
fellas. Oh, you're too kind. Take good care then. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.